everybody. Chris McDonald back with you on this Thursday night, which will be our final show of the week tonight. And going to go out with a bang. Man, we got a great interview coming up here in just a second with the one and only William Federer. We recorded it earlier tonight. And William has been with us before, and I'm excited to have him on tonight. And we were sort of debating who to have tonight, and it's perfect. When you hear the interview, you're going to love it. He's written a book called There Is Really a Santa Claus, and you're going to learn a lot tonight about the history of Christmas, also the history of this man, St. Nicholas. And I learned a lot listening to him from the interview, and rethought some things, a little bit about some things I had believed. And he's not dogmatic about anything, and he's going to offer you some opinions tonight. And he's going to offer you some biblical insight and so forth, and to go along with it. And every time we've had him on the show, he's been absolutely fantastic. And I'm guarantee you're not going to be disappointed tonight. And we hope that you will enjoy Mr. William Federer. I really believe you will. And we hope that you will give him your attention and respect my guest. And listen to what he has to say. Now, this is recorded, so we won't be able to take questions, but he did promise me that in January, we're going to have him back on, and he's going to come on live at night. Maybe we'll do it early in the evening when he can do it, and take your questions. And I think that's going to be a great thing. But you're going to really enjoy this interview tonight, and I'll be back to say goodnight to you at the end briefly. And sayonara, and maybe play a new song or two we recorded today with my dear buddy Eddie Cole. He may be even listening tonight. I don't know if it's past his bedtime or not. I know he's going to laugh at that comment. But if he's out there listening, thank you, buddy. I love you, man. Bless you. I had a good time with him today in the studio, and did some good stuff today. And we'll talk about that more later. But listen, right now, without further ado, here's the one and only Bill Federer. I know him as William. I call him Bill. And you've all enjoyed him before, and he is going to bless your heart. Now, some of you have heard some of this last year. He did this before, but we didn't have the PowerPoint available to us like we do tonight. This is going to be really good stuff. You're going to enjoy this. Whether you heard him last year, whether this is your first time, it's going to bless you. And just let it soak in. And I'm going to tell the self-righteous religious folks out there, don't be posting your stuff in the chat room. You don't like what you're hearing, take a hike, leave, write your nasty emails, but don't trash my guest. You ain't got to agree, but you're going to respect my guest, and you're going to enjoy William Federer tonight, and celebrate Christmas. Here's William Federer and the history of Christmas. See, I put the red sweater on tonight just for you all out there to be nice and kind. And, I may have to break the lights and the Santa hat out afterwards. But here's William Federer. Put some fire in that house for me tonight. Enjoy the interview. We'll be back after the show. And a good evening, everybody. Chris McDonald with you on a very special McFiles pre-recorded broadcast tonight. But we're always grateful to have old friends back with us. And this old guy is... emphasis on friend, not old. And we're grateful to have the one and only William Federer. He is a author, a speaker, but he's also a part of our McFiles family. And he's been with us a few times. And we're grateful to have him on tonight, to get him on before the holidays. And I'm just grateful to have him. He's always been just a treasure trove of information. And I've learned a lot just as a host listening to him. And I've got his books. We've given some of them out to you all, the American Encyclopedia of Quotations, and it's really good stuff. But let me welcome my dear buddy, William Federer, tonight. William, good to see you, my friend, and I hope you have a great Christmas, Merry Christmas. We're going to talk about Christmas a little bit tonight, and it's good to have you again on the McFiles tonight.
Hey, it's always good to be with you.
Always good to be with you. Listen, you wrote a book. We talked about this last year. There's some people that we have here tonight that are new to us, and some are not. But I think it's worth talking about again tonight, about the historical significance of Christmas. And we were somewhat not joking about it. It's serious things that went on at Christmas around this country. None the least of which was the first president, which was not the president at the time, but George Washington paid a visit to the British on a frozen Potomac River. I think it was Christmas Eve, and gave them some Southern hospitality, as we say in the South, and basically slit the throats of the British invaders. And but Christmas has played a big role in this country, but there's a historical precedence to not only Christmas but Santa Claus, and people think that they're Santa Claus, and we the mythical person, but there was a guy that was Saint Nicholas, and he had a interesting past and an interesting situation. As we talked about this last year, he was basically somebody in the church, and I want you to talk about that. You got a book. There truly is a Santa Claus, and you can share that on the screen now if you want to, and they can show the people what you got. There you go. There's really is a Santa Claus. Tell everybody about this book, and tell everybody about Christmas in America, because it's intriguing to me, and I love Christmas. This is my favorite time of the year. I do. I love this season, and a lot of people get their little religious feathers in the water about it. I'm not one of them. I think it's a great time to celebrate the Lord's birth, but there's some historical background to this. It's important for our nation. Talk to us about that tonight.
Sure. Well, I have a PowerPoint, and I'll share some of it just because I think it's interesting. And the book is entitled "There Really Is a Santa Claus: The History of Saint Nicholas and Christmas Holiday Traditions." And I start by going through the date of Christmas. So the first 3 centuries of Christianity, the main focus was the date of Passover, because Jesus was crucified on Passover. But Passover is a Jewish holiday, and it is based on their lunar calendar, and it can be a little earlier or later in the spring and any day of the week. But it wasn't, the Jews did not celebrate birthdays. It was considered pagan. In many other countries in the Middle East and the Far East do not celebrate birthdays. Years ago, we visited Turkey, and we were with a family, and my wife asked the wife when her birthday was. And she goes in the other room and digs through some papers, and she comes out with a piece of paper, and she tells us it's her birthday. She didn't even have it memorized. My son taught in Korea for several years, and the whole country turns 1 year older on January 1st, right? They don't keep their individual birthdays until you're like 64 or 65 or something. And so it was considered pagan. The Jews did not celebrate birthdays. And so nobody really was interested in when was Jesus born. It was not until a lot of Greeks, a lot of Gentiles started becoming Christians that the Greeks celebrated birthdays. And so the question was raised, when was Jesus born? And so this brings up a detective story. And I have the, let's see here. I'm not sure if I can get this one thing off of the screen so you can see it a little bit clearer, but maybe that's better. So the Gospel of Luke says that in the time of Herod, king of Judea. So Herod died between 4 BC and 1 BC. And so this gives us the time frame. And it says in Luke, in the time of King Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, and he's John the Baptist's father, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. Now, what's that? King David divided the Levite priests into 24 groups, and each group took 2 weeks, 6 months apart, and their family division would do all the ministerial work around the temple. And so Abijah was one of those groups. And so if you look at the First Chronicles chapter 24, it gives the order of the Levites, these 24 family groups. And this was confirmed by excavations in Caesarea in 1962 by Hebrew University's Department of Archaeology, and they come up with these 24 family groups. And the first one is Jehoiarib, and the 8th one is Abijah. Why is that important? The temple in Jerusalem was destroyed on the 9th day of Av. That's a Jewish month, and it corresponds to August 4th of 70 AD. And this is in the Talmud, Mishnah, Tanakh. This is also I even access Wikipedia. And it says that in Jewish tradition, Jehoiarib was the priestly corps that was on duty when the second temple was destroyed by the Royal Imperial Army in the second week of the lunar month of Av in 70 AD. And so if Jehoiarib is on duty when the Temple of Jerusalem is destroyed around August 4th of 70 AD, 8 weeks later would have been the time that the family group of Abijah is on duty at the temple.
Right.
And this would be the last week of September,
It's,
which is a very important week, because this is the week of the Day of Atonement, when the high priest would bring the blood into the Holy of Holies, sprinkle on the mercy seat, and everyone's sins in the nation would be forgiven for the past year. They could start the new year off with a clean slate. Obviously, that's foreshadowing Jesus, who cleanses us of our sins, not just for our year, but our entire lives. And also at the end of the week is the Feast of Tabernacles, when they would build booths and live outside and remember when they were coming out of Egypt, and those 40 years, and then also symbolic of being in heaven. And so if Zechariah is doing ministerial work in the temple this last week of September, and the angel appears to him and tells him that his wife Elizabeth is going to conceive, and he's to name the child John. He didn't believe the angel, so the angel strikes him dumb, so he couldn't speak doubt. And so the Byzantine Rite calendar marks September 23rd as the conception of John the Baptist, the forerunner, as does the 2nd century Proto-Evangelium of St. James. And so this was one of the very first days in the Christian calendar that was celebrated, the conception of John the Baptist, around September 23rd. Now, why is this important? Well, the Gospel of Luke goes on and says that the angel Gabriel appears to Mary and announces to her that she will conceive of the Holy Spirit and the child will be the Savior, and that her cousin Elizabeth is in her 6th month. Well, 6 months after September 23rd would be March 23rd, or the last week of March. And so in the last week of March is when the angel appeared to Mary, and she conceived with baby Jesus. Right. And so the traditional date for the Annunciation, when the angel announced to Mary, is March 25th. Why is that important? Because 9 months after March 25th is December 25th. So it very well could be that December 25th is the actual date of Jesus's birth. And Susan K. Rowell wrote in the book Toward the Origin of Christmas, and she says, St. John Chrysostom, an early church father, counts off the months of Elizabeth's pregnancy, dates Mary's conception from the 6 months of Elizabeth's, then counts off another 9 months to arrive at the birth date of Christ. Some people say, well, wait a second, I thought Christmas was to replace the Roman Saturnalia. Well, the Saturnalia is the winter solstice, and it's the shortest day of the year. It's December 21st, 22nd. The Earth goes in an elliptical orbit around the sun. And in the furthest ends of the ellipse, the Earth goes from going away from the sun to turning and coming back. And so for 2 days, it looks like the sun stands still in the orbit. And so sol means sun, stis means still. So you have a winter solstice, December 21st, 22nd, and then a summer solstice on the other end of this elliptical orbit, which was June 21st, 22nd. And then halfway between, you have the equinoxes. Equa is equal, nox means night, and that would be the spring equinox, fall equinox. Anyway, so the Saturnalia, the Feast of Saturn, is the winter solstice. That's December 21st and 22nd. That's not December 25th. So if they were going to pick something to supplant the Roman Saturnalia, they would have picked it on December 21st, 22nd. They would not have picked December 25th. And then some say, well, the shepherds were in the field and it would have been wintertime and cold, so there wouldn't have been sheep in the field in December. Well, the climate of Jerusalem is almost identical to Flagstaff, Arizona. And so it gets down to around 40 degrees at nighttime. It's not that cold. And they would have had sheep in the field because they had daily sacrifices. So I'm not dogmatic about it, because looking at these old calendars is a little bit confusing, but there is a significant evidence that December 25th could very well be the birth date of Christ. But whether it's that date or not, the most important thing is that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us.
Absolutely.
And this is the whole gospel, that God is a just God. He can never change his nature, which means he has to judge every sin. If God does not judge a sin, then his silence would in effect be giving consent to the sin. It's called the rule of tacit admission. It's what you see in wedding ceremonies where the pastors tell the congregation, if you're silent, you're giving consent, right, to the wedding. And so if there's sins and God is silent, not judging them, he would be giving consent to them. And if God gives consent to one sin one time, he denies his just nature. He denies himself. He ungods himself. He's kicked out of heaven. And so he cannot deny himself. He's not going to get kicked out of heaven. And he is going to judge every sin. And so in like a mathematical equation, you have constants and variables. The constant is God is just. He forever was, is, and forever will be just, which means he has to judge every single sin. But God is love in that he provided the lamb to take the judgment for the sin. So Jesus, the only begotten Son of God, became the lamb and took the judgments. Like Abraham and Isaac are going to the top of Mount Moriah, and Isaac, the son, says, Father, we have the wood for the sacrifice and we have the coals for the sacrifice, but where is the sacrifice? And Abraham says, Son, God will provide himself a sacrifice. And it has a double meaning. I'm trusting God will have a ram up in the bush, which he did. It was caught by its head in a thorn bush, a crown of thorns on its head, right? But the second meaning is that God will provide himself as the sacrifice. And that's what happened. Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, the only begotten Son of God, became the lamb. And the song that was written by Charles Wesley, Amazing Love, How Can It Be,
Yes.
That Thou, My God, Shouldst Die For Me.
Yes.
So God is completely just in that he judges every sin, but he's completely love in that he provided the lamb to take the judgment for the sin. So this way, so the lamb is God's idea. He came up with it. Right? It's his way to love us without having to judge us. And
So powerful. That's good stuff. I'm glad you brought that up about the shepherds, because I'm one of those that have mentioned to our people, because the date gets argued back and forth through the centuries and the decades, and I'm glad you said what you said. We can't be 100,000% sure, but you make a great argument that it very likely could be December 25th, because I've always believed that the winter months would have been too cold for the shepherds. And again, another thing that's probably an uncertainty, and I'll let you chime in on this a little bit, is there any indication of when they went to the Christ child, how old he was? I know when the wise men came, there are some Bible scholars that have said that he may have been 3 to 4 months old, maybe even 3 years old. I don't know when the wise men came. Can you sort of elaborate on that a little bit about the shepherds and when they came to visit the Christ child, how old he was?
Yeah, now the shepherds, I think, was at the actual birth.
Okay.
But the wise men could have been anywhere from 2 years old and younger.
That's what I thought.
And we know that because Herod said, kill all the babies 2 years and younger. Daniel in the lion's den, right? Daniel was in Babylon, which got taken over by Media Persia and then became Persia. And he was the most important advisor to the king. And he studied prophecy. Daniel studied Jeremiah, which is sort of interesting to have one prophet study another prophet. But Daniel studied Jeremiah and saw where it said in 70 years the Jews will go back and rebuild the temple. And so he sets himself to fast and pray. And then, the angel appears to him. And then, so we know Daniel studied prophecies. And if he was the most important advisor there in Persia, then he would have been teaching other people. And so there supposedly was a school of wise men studying prophecies, and this is most likely where these 3 wise men came from. And anyway, the story of Nicholas, the church was born into a one-world anti-Christian government, the Roman Empire, right? We sort of remind ourselves, gee, the world's getting more anti-Christian. Well, the church was born into a one-world anti-Christian government, the Roman Empire.
That's right.
And Augustus Caesar wanted to have a worldwide tracking system called the census. And that was new technology. If he could have had 5G and cell phones and satellites and cameras, he would have tracked everybody that way. And so here you have Mary and Joseph having to leave Bethlehem, go to Nazareth to be tracked, to register to be tracked. And but in the middle of the devil working his plan of global government, God was working his plan behind the scene of having the Savior be born. And Now, for the first 3 centuries of Christianity, there are 10 major persecutions. Christians are thrown to the lions.
Right.
11 of the 12 apostles were martyred. John was thrown in a pot of oil. And so we have these terrible persecutions. And the worst was Diocletian. This is 285 AD. He loses some battles with Persia. He asked his generals why. And they said, well, you've neglected having the army worship the Roman gods. And so Diocletian says, okay, everybody in the army, get back to worshiping the Roman gods. Well, there were a lot of Christians in the military because a previous emperor named Gallienus had been lax. And so Christianity exploded and grew. But now that Diocletian's in, these Christians are forced out of the military. Once all the Christians are purged from the military, Diocletian decides to use the military, to use the law enforcement, to use them to go province by province and forcing paganism, forcing everybody to return to the Roman pagan religion. And they would arrest the pastors and confiscate the scriptures and tear down the churches and boil them there alive and cut out their tongues. It was terrible. And it went on for a decade. And then that's during this time that Nicholas was born. And Nicholas is the most popular Greek Orthodox saint. He is to the Greeks what St. Peter is to the Roman Catholics. He's sort of the founding father of the Greek church. And during this time of persecution, Asia Minor, today that's Turkey, is where Nicholas lived. And a little town called Patara. And a movement was sweeping through Christianity called Pietism, the beginning of the monasticism movement. And it was this idea that if you really become a Christian, you should give away all your money and live as a poor person. And it goes back to scripture where Jesus told the rich young ruler, one thing you lack, sell all you had, give to the poor, then come and follow me. And so you had this movement of people becoming Christian and being so excited that they finally had a personal relationship with Jesus that they would give all their money and then be a hermit in a cave the rest of their life and just enjoy their personal relationship, or join a monastery and even take vows of silence so you won't even hear from them again the rest of their life. And it was their version of separation of church and state. It was their version of, I'm just going to have my own relationship with God. I'm going to sort of withdraw. And so Nicholas becomes a Christian. And sure enough, he decides he's going to give away all his money and join a monastery in the Holy Land. And so he wants to give away his money at nighttime. And he goes through the neighborhoods of the poor people and he throws the money in the window because he doesn't want them to know that he did it. He wants the credit to go to God and not to him. And so one of the stories that became popular is a merchant in the town of Patara had gone bankrupt. The creditors would not only come and take your house and lands, they would take your children.
Exactly.
And this merchant had 3 beautiful daughters. He knew if they were taken, it would be sex trafficking, a terrible life. So the merchant had an idea. He thought if he could hurry up and marry his daughters off, the creditors couldn't take them. Unfortunately, he did not have money for a dowry, which was needed in that area of the world for a legally recognized wedding. Well, Nicholas hears the problem late one night, throws some money in the window. Supposedly, it landed in a shoe or a stocking that was drying by the fireplace, and provides a dowry. The oldest daughter can get married. And then he throws some money in the window for the second daughter, and she's able to have a dowry and get married. And when he's going to throw the money in for the third daughter, by this time the dad's expecting it, he's waiting up. And when the money hits the floor, the dad runs outside and catches Nicholas. And Nicholas makes the father promise not to tell where the money came from because he wants the credit to go to God and not to him. And so this is the origin of the tradition of secret gift giving on the anniversary of Nicholas's death, which is December 6th of 343 AD. And all the stories of stockings drying by the fireplace and the midnight visits from St. Nicholas and the shoes and everything. There's even a stained glass window in a church, and there's Nicholas throwing the money in the window and bags of gold, and underneath it says he provides a dowry for 3 girls.
Wow.
And so he's often pictured as a bishop with his hat and his staff, and he's holding 3 gold balls, symbolizing the 3 bags of gold that he threw in the window of the poor people. And this is why St. Nicholas became the patron saint of pawnbrokers. You're like, what? Yeah, pawnbrokers will hang 3 gold balls outside of their shop, and they would say, we help families out in their time of financial need. It's like, okay, it's a little bit of a stretch, but all right. Well, so Nicholas gives away all his money, decides to join a monastery in the Holy Land. But right before he takes his vows of silence, the Lord tells him not to hide his light under a bushel. So he goes back to Myra in Turkey. It's a little coastal city. And unbeknownst to him, the bishop had died. And the church leaders couldn't decide who the next bishop was going to be. And so Nicholas's habit was to fast all night and then go to church and not eat until after church. That's when he would break the fast. So they actually called it break fast. That was the tradition that church people did.
How about that?
And so he fasts, he comes to church, and one of the church leaders had a dream that the first person to church would be named Nicholas, and he was to be their next bishop. And so Nicholas shows up at church, and they ask his name. When he says Nicholas, they go, "You're supposed to be the bishop." Well, he was not too thrilled, because the Roman Emperor Diocletian was arresting bishops and killing them. So it was sort of like, you be the bishop. No, I insist you first. No, really, you be the bishop. No, right? So he was not too thrilled, but he finally agreed, and he was arrested. And he was put in prison awaiting death. And that's when Diocletian was struck with an intestinal disease. And he abdicates the throne on May 1st, 305 AD. And this is a big deal, because by this time, emperors had been declaring themselves a god, sprinkling gold dust in their hair, and demanding their image be worshipped. So this was sort of like a god resigning. And the next emperor was Galerius. He continues the persecution. He's struck with an intestinal disease and dies. And now it's a toss-up between four big generals who are defeated. It gets down to Constantine and Maxentius. Constantine is in York, Britain. Britain was Roman all the way from Julius Caesar. And so his men surround him and say, "Hail Caesar." In other words, we're with you, go for it. And so Constantine marches toward Rome. And he is getting ready for the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD. And before the battle, he sees the sign of Christ in the sky. And supposedly this is the first two Greek letters of the name Christ. So the Hebrew word Messiah, which means the anointed one, when you translate that into Greek, it's pronounced Christ. And the Greek letter that makes the K sound is written as an X, and it's called a chi. And the Greek letter that makes the sound for Christ, is called the rho, and it's written as a big P. And so the first two letters of the Greek name for Christ is X and P. And Constantine supposedly heard the words "in hoc signo vinces," which in Latin means "in this sign you'll be invincible." And so they would have this X and a P with a letters underneath IHSV, in hoc signo vinces, in this sign you'll be invincible. Well, he wins the battle, and afterwards, time goes on, the chi rho, the XP, gets shortened to the X, and it's called the Christ cross, or as we say, crisscross. And that's where you get the Xmas, X-MAS. It's not X crossing out Christ. It's the Greek letter chi, which stands for Christ. That's where you get the oath, swear to tell the truth, so, and you cross your heart, right?
Right.
And then you would swear to make an oath. Well, if you're writing on a piece of paper, you would swear by signing at the Christ's cross. And that's come down to us as sign at the X. And then they would kiss it to show sincerity, and that's come down to us as the X's and the O's on the bottom of a Valentine.
Right. Okay.
And so 313 AD, Edict of Milan, it's officially okay to be a Christian. And this is when Nicholas is let out of jail. And now that it's okay to be a Christian, he preaches publicly against paganism. So nearby was the temple to Diana, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, had 127 huge pillars and temple prostitutes. And it was the Las Vegas of the Mediterranean. And Nicholas preaches against it, and the people tear the temple down. Well, the Apostle Paul preached against Diana worship at Ephesus.
He did.
Remember, they had got the other greatest Diana, the goddess of the Ephesians, and then they had this big riot and everything. And so then they outlawed the Olympics. And the Olympics were ran naked. And the word gym for gymnasium, G-Y-M, is the Greek word for naked. And so these Greeks were into naked statues and naked bodies, and gym. It was pretty immoral. And so this is when they stopped the Olympics. And then Nicholas preaches against exposure of unwanted infants. This is their version of abortion. And the Roman practice was the mother would bear the child, lay it at the father's feet. If the father did not pick the child up, the mother had to put the baby in a basket, set it outside, and expose it to the elements and let the baby die. And so that's where you get these stories of a knock at the door of an old couple, and they open it, and there's a baby in a basket. I mean, who leaves a baby in a basket? The Romans did.
Wow.
Right? And so the early Christians would collect these babies and raise them as orphans. And as a matter of fact, Rome itself, the legend is that it was founded by two abandoned boys, Romulus and Remus. Right? The dad put them out in the wood to expose them to the elements and let them die. And supposedly a wolf came by and nursed them. And that's when they grew up. And so that's the legend of Rome. But Nicholas preaches against exposure of unwanted infants. So he would have been someone that would be a fire and brimstone preacher today. He'd be preaching against all the sexual agenda. He'd be preaching against all the abortion. And then there's the Arian heresy. A guy named Arius said Jesus was a little less than God. He was a created being. He writes a catchy song. And the Visigoths, which were a tribal group that came into Rome, converted en masse to Arianism. And it's not only splitting the church, it's now splitting the Roman Empire. And since Constantine had made Christianity the de facto religion of the empire, he's having a political fallout. So he orders and pays for all the bishops to come together for the very first time ever in one spot called Nicaea, which is not too far from Myra, where Nicholas was. And they settled the heresy by writing the Nicene Creed. And the story is that Nicholas was there, and he was so upset at Arius for starting the Arian heresy that Nicholas slaps Arius across the face. And so jolly old St. Nick had a little temper. Better watch out when he's coming to town.
You better watch out when he's coming to town.
I was going through the internet to find images of St. Nicholas, and I found one, and it's got him as an old Greek icon there, and it says underneath, "I came to give presents to kids and to punch heretics. I just ran out of presents."
I love it.
And,
today? We need him back here today in 2022. I'll just say that. Go ahead.
Yeah. And again, he's the most popular Greek Orthodox saint. There's more Greek Orthodox churches named after Nicholas than anybody else. So they have lots of stories. And like one of the stories is there was a famine, and he goes down to the docks and talks some sailors into unloading their grain to feed his people, promising God would bless them. On their return trip, they said the grain that was left had multiplied in the hull of their ship, sort of like Elijah and the little widow with her meal barrel that didn't run empty. And then there was a storm, and the ships couldn't get back, and they get Nicholas to pray, and the sea becomes calm. And sort of like Jesus calming the sea. So he also was the patron saint of sailors. And then there's a corrupt politician, a governor, and he's about to execute some soldiers to cover up his corruption. We're familiar with politicians that are corrupt, and they have former associates that mysteriously die or suicided and so forth, the body count list. And so this governor was about to kill off some people. Nicholas hears about it, and he goes down to the execution spot, grabs the sword out of the executioner's hand, throws it down, and then in front of everybody tells all the corrupt stuff the governor was doing, and he repents. And so he would have been a preacher today that would be standing up to corrupt politicians. And then you have another consul. What's this one about? So the Eastern Europeans began to grow a little different in their traditions than the Western Europeans. And in the East, they celebrated Epiphany, the visit of the three wise men, on January 6th as the holiest day of the season. The word Epiphany means to be revealed to the world. And so this is when these wise men came and Jesus was revealed as the Savior. But Western Europe celebrated December 25th, Christmas, as the holiest day, and they couldn't decide which day was holier. So at this council of Tours in 567 AD, they decided to make all 12 days between December 25th and January 6th the 12 days of Christmas.
Interesting.
So the 12 days are not the 12 days leading up to Christmas. They're the 12 days between December 25th and January 6th. And they were called holy days. And over the years, holy days got pronounced holiday. And so then you have Justinian becomes the Roman emperor, and he builds this enormous church called the Hagia Sophia. It's the biggest church in Christendom for 1,000 years. And he also builds a church and names it after Nicholas in the little town of Myra, which now today is called Demre, Turkey. And then you have Vladimir the Great, the Emperor of Russia. He throws all of his pagan gods in the Dnieper River, lets the word out that he's wanting to become a monotheistic country. Some Muslims show up, and the first chronicle of Russia, their court record, says that they told them about their Islamic faith. And it says that Vladimir listened intently when they told him that paradise was filled full of virgins that would fulfill all his desires, because he was fond of women. But then when they told him he could not drink alcohol, he said, we cannot have this religion because joy is the drink of the Russes, the Russians. It's sort of funny that drink is the reason that Russia didn't convert to Islam.
That is true.
Jews sent ambassadors, and he's like, well, you offended your God, and he chased you out of Jerusalem. Why should I follow you? And then some Catholics sent ambassadors, but finally the Greek Orthodox did. And they visited that Hagia Sophia, that big church that Justinian built. And they said, we felt like we were walking into heaven. I mean, it's 165 feet high, 102 foot across dome, 4 acres of gold mosaics. And they said they speak Greek, the language of the New Testament. And their land was where John spoke and Paul spoke. And so they sort of presented the Greek Orthodox as sort of more or less having a corner on the market when it comes to Christianity. So Vladimir converts to Greek Orthodox Christianity and adopts Nicholas as the patron saint of Russia. And that's why you have so many churches and czars named Nicholas there in Russia. And then Muslims invade, and they would destroy churches and graves and artwork and libraries, museums. And the Ottoman Turks and the Muslims destroyed the pyramids in Egypt. And we forget, in 846 AD, 11,000 Muslim warriors invaded Rome.
Wow.
And they trashed the bones of St. Peter and St. Paul. And it was after this that Pope Leo decided to build a 39-foot wall around the Vatican. And it's still there to this day. Well, so the threat of them destroying the grave of St. Nicholas was a real threat. And so in the year 1087, the Christians moved the grave of their most famous founding father, Greek Orthodox saint, to Italy. And the Pope that dedicates it is Urban II, little town called Bari, B-A-R-I. And so this Pope Urban goes to the Council of Clermont and begs these European kings to send help to the Greeks. And they do. It's called the First Crusade. And anyway, there's 9 major crusades over the next 2 centuries. And the crusades basically put the Muslims on the defensive for 2 centuries, but later they picked up where they left off, and they've had 14 centuries of crusades. And so now that St. Nicholas traditions are in Italy, the gift giving becomes popular. And just like today, people say, oh, it's getting too materialistic. We need to get back to the reason for the season. That's what St. Francis of Assisi did. He created the creche scene, the nativity scene in the year 1223, and said, look, we need to get back to the reason for the season, that Jesus, the Son of God, was born in the manger.
Great point.
And then you have Martin Luther starts the Reformation in 1517, and he ends all the saints' days. By this time, there's several saints' days for every single day of the year, and churches are filled full of relics and statues. Martin Luther considers this a distraction from Christ, and he ends all the saints' days. But the Germans like the gift giving that was associated with December 6th, St. Nicholas Day. So Martin Luther moves all the gift giving to December 25th and says all gifts come from the Christ child. And the German pronunciation of Christ child is Christkindl. Like kindergarten, kindercare, kind means child, Chris means Christ. And so over the centuries, Chris Kindle got pronounced Chris Kringle.
Interesting.
So Chris Kringle is really Chris Kindle, which means Christ child. And there's a Chris Kindle market. And so then you have another interesting piece of the puzzle. We're all familiar with St. Patrick. He left Britain and became a missionary to Ireland and converted these Druid pagans to Christianity in the early 400 ADs. And the same place in Britain, you get another missionary named St. Boniface. And he is a missionary to the Germans. And the Germans worship Thor, who lived in a big oak tree. And Thor is where you get the name Thor's Day or Thursday. And the Germans worshiped another god named Woden. And so he is where we get Woden's Day or Wednesday.
Wow.
So the Quakers would not say Wednesday and Thursday because they were pagan God's day. So they would call them 4th day and 5th day.
Interesting.
They would say Sunday, Monday, Tuesday,
Fourth day, fifth day.
fourth day, fifth day, and then Friday and Saturday. And so St. Boniface, in the early 700s, takes his axe and he goes through the woods to Geismar, Germany, and he chops down Thor's oak. Right before they were going to do a sacrifice, could have been an animal, something that was a human sacrifice, and so the story goes on. Now, 722 A.D. This is 10 years before the Muslims are stopped from invading France at the Battle of Tours in 732 A.D. So the story is Boniface chops the tree down, and then he points at a little evergreen tree, and he says that this is the tree of the Christ child. So Henry Van Dyke wrote a poem, First Christmas Tree, 1906. St. Boniface Winfred, apostle to the Germans, the day before Christmas in the year of our Lord, 722, he chops down Thor's tree, and then he says, not a drop of blood shall fall tonight, for this is the birth night of Christ, Son of the All-Father, Savior of the world. This little tree, a young child of the forest, shall be a home tree tonight, pointing at the evergreen. It's a wood of peace, for your houses are built of firs, a sign of endless life, for its branches are evergreen, it points toward heaven. Let this be the tree of the Christ child, gather about it with loving gifts of kindness. And so in Fritzlar, Germany, there is a statue of St. Boniface standing on the stump of an oak tree with an axe in his hand. And with his other hand, he's holding a church. And so the tree became symbolic of the Germans converting to Christianity. And they actually used it to teach the Trinity. So the same way St. Patrick used the three-leaf clover to teach these illiterate Druids about the Trinity, 3 in 1. St. Boniface used the evergreen tree because it was sort of in the shape of a triangle, right? And now the lights in the tree, lights at this time of the year go back to Hanukkah. And the story is that Cyrus lets the Jews go back and rebuild the temple. And so the Jews live in this area of Persia. But then Persia is conquered by Alexander the Great. He dies. His kingdom is divided into 4. And one of the generals takes the Syria area, which includes Jerusalem. And over the years, they got a wicked king named Antiochus Epiphanes. And he is tired of these Jews not obeying his government mandates. And so he decides he's going to wipe out their religion. He goes into Jerusalem, trashes the temple, goes and makes these Levites sacrifice pigs. And one of them, the Maccabees, instead of killing the pig, he turns and he kills the soldier. His sons jump out, kill more soldiers. They start a guerrilla warfare, and they fight and drive Antiochus Epiphanes out of Jerusalem. And they go in the temple. They're going to relight the menorah, the candlestick, but there's only enough oil for 1 day, and it miraculously burns an entire week, 8 days. And so this is called the Feast of Dedication. And even Jesus was in Jerusalem and on the Feast of Dedication. And so revealing himself as the light of the world. And so Martin Luther could have seen menorahs in the windows of Jews, may have given him the idea to put candles in the branches of the evergreen tree. And he told his children, this is like the sky above Bethlehem on the night of Christ's birth.
Wow.
And
wow.
And an interesting, sort of funny, a woodcut, right? When they first started doing printing, they would carve something in wood, cover it with ink, and then put a piece of paper over it. And so they make sort of a stamp. But there's a woodcut of Martin Luther and his wife and family having Christmas with an evergreen tree and lights in the tree. And then in the side, there's his son with a crossbow. And you can see the mother saying, watch out, you could put an eye out with that thing.
Yeah.
Or like the BB guns of today, right? And anyway, so to say Martin Luther brings the Reformation to Germany, and Henry VIII brings the Reformation to England. But instead of a spiritual reason, he just wants another wife. Pope wouldn't recognize his divorce. He makes himself his own pope and goes on to have 6 wives. And so Henry VIII ends the saints' days, most of them, keeps the St. Michael's Day and a couple. And he brings back an old Roman holiday, Saturnalia. Now, you have to remember, Britain used to be a Roman colony, and Saturn was their god of feasting and plenty and merriment. If you've ever seen the Christmas Carol with Charles Dickens, there's the spirit of Christmas present. He's the ho happy party guy, right? With the beard, the robes, the wreath in his hair, goblet of wine, and you're looking at him, asking yourself, who is this guy? He sort of looks like Santa, but he also sort of looks like some Roman god. Well, that's who he was. He was Saturn. They Christianized him, called him Father Christmas. They couldn't call him St. Nicholas because saints were sort of outlawed at this time. And so Christmas under Henry VIII became a party time. drinking, carousing, wassailing, chasing women, gambling. And it was sort of like a Mardi Gras. People forget Mardi Gras used to be a spiritual day. It was the day before Lent when you would fast 40 days before Easter when you'd celebrate the resurrection. And now it's this lewd party in New Orleans. That's sort of what happened with Christmas in England under Henry VIII. And so when the Puritans came along, they did not like Christmas. They said it was too worldly. One of the Puritan leaders, Cotton Mather, wrote, "Can you in your conscience think that our holy Savior is honored by mad mirth, long eating, hard drinking, lewd gaming, rude reveling, by a mass fit for none other than a Saturn or a Bacchus or a night of Muhammad and Ramadan? You cannot possibly think so. That of the birth of our Savior, for which we owe our high praises, we take time to please the hellish legions and do actions that have much more of hell than of heaven in them." And so the Puritans would not allow Shakespeare to mention God in his plays. And so Shakespeare wrote Midsummer's Night's Dream and put in little fairies because he wanted something supernatural. The Puritans considered it taking God's name in vain to speak it in front of a bunch of drunk people in a theater. And then Shakespeare wrote The Twelfth Night. Well, it was the 12th night of Christmas, but since he couldn't celebrate the religious side of it, he made it into a carnivalesque drunken revelry based on the ancient Roman festival Saturnalia. And so the Puritans eventually tore Shakespeare's theater down. And it was not rebuilt until 1980 as a tourist attraction. At anchor in Plymouth Harbor, Christmas Day, but not observed by these colonists, they being opposed to all saints' days, etc. A large party went ashore this morning to fell timber and begin building. They began to erect the first house about 20 feet square for their common use to receive them and their goods. Now, William Bradford talks about the next year, a second boatload of pilgrims came over. And he writes one more incident, rather amusing. On Christmas Day, the governor called the people as usual out to work, and most of the new company excused themselves and said it went against their consciences to work on that day. So the governor told them that if they made it a matter of conscience, he would spare them till they became better informed. So he went with the rest and left them. But on returning from work at noon, he found them at play in the street, some pitching the bars, some at stool ball and such like sports. So the governor went to them and took away their games and told them that it was against his conscience that they should play and others work. If they made it a keeping the day a matter of devotion, let them remain in their houses, but let there be no gaming and reveling in the streets. So even the pilgrims couldn't decide, and then the Puritans came over and they, in 1659, had a law, whoever shall be found observing any such day as Christmas, either by forbearing labor, feasting, or any other way, shall pay for each offense 5 shillings as a fine. It was not, so the Pilgrims, Puritans, and most Presbyterians did not celebrate Christmas because it was a party time under Henry VIII. But later you have the Germans, the French, and especially the Dutch, and they loved Christmas. And so this is where we pick up with the Dutch. So the Dutch pronunciation of Saint Nicholas is Sant Nicolaas. That's where you get Santa Claus.
Right.
So Santa Claus is the Dutch pronunciation of Saint Nicholas. So the Catholics saying that St. Peter's at the gates of heaven, the Dutch do a take on the book of Revelation. And Jesus will return at the end of the world to judge the living and the dead, riding a white horse. And the saints will come back with him, riding white horses. And St. Nicholas is one of the saints, so he will be one of those riding a white horse. But since he's so special, he gets to come back once a year for a little mini judgment, a little checkup on the kids, see who's naughty, see who's nice. And so in Holland, they have St. Nicholas coming once a year dressed as a bishop riding a white horse. And he's going to check up on the kids. And saints come from where? Heaven. Well, that turns into the North Pole. And the angels turn into the elves. And the Lamb's Book of Life and Book of Works turns into the Book of the Naughty and the Nice. And in Norway, they didn't have horses abundantly, so they had reindeer. And so now Nicholas is riding a reindeer, and then he's got a wagon with reindeer. And so you can see what started as a biblical theme sort of gets a little bit off.
Yep.
And the Dutch add something else, a helper named Zwarte Piet, Black Peter, and he's a Muslim, a Moor. And they tell the kids that if you're good, St. Nicholas gives you a present. if you're naughty, the little Zwarte Piet will put you in a gunny sack, take you back to Spain, and sell you into Muslim slavery.
Wow.
People forget that Muslims controlled Spain for 700 years and carried away tens of thousands, even millions, into slavery. There were whole Catholic orders in Europe through the Middle Ages called the Trinitarians. The head of the order was called the ransomer, and they would collect alms and donations at churches to ransom your friends. And so this was a real threat. And I have 5 brothers and 5 sisters. I would have loved to have tormented my little brothers with this one. Right? Hey, Santa Claus is coming. Might not see you again. It's been real, you know. So often when you tell a little boy that Santa's coming, they start crying because they might think it's their last night on Earth. And wow. I did a call-in one time, and the guy says, yeah, I was raised in Holland, and all the little boys in our neighborhood would go to sleep on the night before Santa Claus visiting with pocket knives in their pockets. And I said, why is that? He goes, that's to cut ourselves out of the gunny sack in case Zwarte Piet took us. And so the Dutch, most of our traditions come from the Dutch, and the Dutch loved St. Nicholas. And remember when you had the Dutch have a navy, a merchant military navy that went across the whole world. And so that's why they liked Nicholas as the patron saint of sailors.
Interesting.
And they would often have on the prow of their ship, instead of a mermaid or a Poseidon, they would have a Nicholas. And so the largest church in Amsterdam is the St. Nicholas Church, Basilica van de Heilige Nicholas, Holy Nicholas in Amsterdam. And so when they come across to settle New Amsterdam, the church they formed was the Dutch Reformed Church of St. Nicholas in Battery Park, New York in 1642. And this church goes on and grows, and it ends up becoming the largest Protestant cathedral in America. And it was on the corner of 48th Street and 5th Avenue.
Interesting.
And as the city became more of a financial district and attendance began to drop, Sinclair Oil Company approached the church elders and said, we want to buy this corner. And they tore the church down to build an oil company building. And the church changed its name to Marble Collegiate Church, moved a little bit further away. The pastor became, over the centuries, in modern times, Norman Vincent Peale. And many famous people went to the church, including Donald Trump.
Interesting.
And
wow.
And so you have these Dutch pictures of St. Nicholas dressed as a bishop coming and giving out presents. And then the Dutch settled New Amsterdam, which became New York in 1660. And then you have Washington Irving in New York. He writes Rip Van Winkle and Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And by the way, Roosevelt is a Dutch name. So Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, they were Dutch. And so Washington Irving writes Dietrich Knickerbocker's A History of New York from the beginning of the New World to the end of the Dutch dynasty, 1809. Knickerbocker is a made-up author's name, yet it was so popular that you have the New York Knicks basketball team.
That's right. That's right.
And he would write sort of embellished history, like Paul Bunyan and the Blue Ox. You know, I mean, he would just like put all kinds of fables in there, and he coined the term Gotham City. And so he says St. Nicholas rode over the housetops, drawing forth magnificent presents, dropping them down the chimneys of his favorites. Now he visits us one night a year, rattles down the chimneys, confining his presents merely to children. Stockings found in the morning mysteriously filled. But Washington Irving describes him not dressed as a bishop, but in a typical Dutch outfit of a stocking hat, long pair of trunk hose, a large pipe, belts, leather boot. And then he goes on, laying his finger beside his nose, gave a significant look, then mounting his wagon, he returned over the treetops and disappeared. And so that's where you get these New York pictures of the stockings by the fireplace. And then 1823, New York is Clement Moore. He's a Hebrew professor. His family owned land in New York and donated it to build a seminary, an Anglican seminary. And there's a Clement Moore Park at the 10th Avenue and 22nd Street. And so in 1823, he writes a poem for his children. And we all know it. It was the night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care in hopes that St. Nicholas would soon be there. So he's still St. Nicholas, but he's shrunk and he's dressed in a Dutch outfit. And with tiny little dry bow so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. And anyway, so then you have middle of the 1800s Civil War, and Thomas Nast is an illustrator for Harper's Weekly magazine. He's the one who gave us the Republican elephant and Democrat mule. And he did an illustration during the Civil War on St. Nicholas visiting the Union troops. And in the background, there's a North Pole sign. And this is a political jab at the South to say that St. Nicholas is talking to the North, right? And then he does a issue in color, and this is the first time the outfit's red. And then you have the Civil War, and lots of songs are written, like I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. And then in the early 1900s, Coca-Cola. They hire an artist named Haddon Sundblom. He's the one who gave us the Quaker Oats Man and Aunt Jemima syrup. And he does a painting of Santa Claus drinking Coke. He does a new picture every year for 30 years.
Wow.
And since Coca-Cola pioneered mass marketing, it's the best trademark name in the world. This is the image of Santa that spread around the world. He's full size again. He's not a little elf. He's got rosy cheeks, ruddy complexion, nice huggable grandfather guy. And sort of interesting, you had the tobacco, because he had him smoking the pipe, and now he's smoking Lucky Strikes and Camel and all these other different artwork. So it gets a little bit off track. But if you go back, you had the Coca-Cola Santa, but then you go back to the Dutch St. Nicholas visiting once a year, checking up on the kids. But you go further back and you go, there really was a St. Nicholas in Greece, and he lived in the 3rd, 4th century, and he became a serious Christian, and he was imprisoned for his Christian faith by the government. He was a bishop. He preached against paganism and sexual immorality and against their version of abortion. He stood up for the Trinity and against Arianism. But most importantly, he was generous and gave to the poor. And that's who we remember on the St. Nicholas traditions.
That is absolutely fantastic. And this is all in your book. If you can show your cover of your book again, right there, there's really a Santa Claus, and AmericanMinute.com. I guess you outline all these charts and all this in that book there, because I've got it. It's a beautiful book. It's an excellent book, correct?
Yeah. And there's a lot more there. There's different stories of the, let me stop the screen share.
There we go.
There's the, everything that happened in Christmas, like you mentioned, Washington crossing the Delaware on Christmas Day evening, attacking the German Hessians at Trenton. You have Captain Cook discover the Christmas Island, looking for a solar eclipse in 1777. You have the Battle of the Bulge that took place over Christmas, 1944. You have the Christmas truce of 1914, where before America gets into World War I, you have the Germans and the French, English, Belgium, Dutch. They have a Christmas Eve, start singing Christmas carols and Silent Night, and then they climb out of their trenches, and then they shake hands, and then they, the next day have soccer games, and they cut each other's hair and clip off their buttons and trade them, and they have joint funerals and so forth. And but then the next day, the commanding officers were like, "Don't fraternize with the enemy," and they stopped it. And then 1968, Apollo 8 is circling the moon, and it's on Christmas Eve. And so the astronaut Frank Borman reads the first chapter of the book of Genesis, and then says, "God bless everyone on the good old earth." And so it's just fascinating things that happened on Christmas.
Well, we've run out of time, but I do want to just say a few general things. I want to thank you. This has been intriguing. I love this, and I'm glad we got the PowerPoint this time. Last time we didn't have the PowerPoint working, and it was so good to follow the illustrations. But the bottom line is that, and I said this the other night, and I'll let you wrap us up on this. I've always looked at Christmas as a very simple choice. We can celebrate the paganism, which we don't need to do. We can understand it historically, like I think you've done a beautiful job tonight. And the third thing, and it ties into the historical thing, is we honor it as biblical, a way to share the love of Christ, because it is an honor and it is a time that we acknowledge that the Lord came to this earth. And I love what you said earlier in the interview. Ultimately, the day ultimately don't matter. If it's the December 25th, that's great. If it's spring, fall, whatever, the fact is, William, he came. And he came born of a virgin, just like the Bible tells us he did. And it's important. I think the history of this, though, and the date, I think it calms people's fears, because there is so much angst out there. And it's just been the last few years. People are losing their lunch over celebrating Christmas. And they are always wanting to point to the pagan roots, the Babylonian roots, and all this. And I think you've been a beautiful job tonight to let people understand that there's a historical element to this. And this man, Saint Nicholas, was not some mystical person. He was an actual human being with a heart for God. He loved the Lord, evidently. He loved people. He cared for people. He gave. And I don't think that we can have too much of that in this world myself. I think we need a lot more of St. Nicholas in us tonight. And I'll just say that as my final word. I'll give you the final word. I think that's a fair statement, correct?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We remember Apostle Peter, Apostle Paul, and St. John. And this is sort of like a continuation. Here's a godly man, and we don't have to follow all that stuff that's been added on. But it's a hard sell to say, well, Santa is Satan. See, you can change the letters around. It's like, no, Santa means sanctified, means holy. Like Santa Fe means holy faith, and Santa Monica, and Santa Clara, and Santa is the Spanish Latin word for holy, for saint. And so he was a man that loved God, and
he did. Yes, he did.
So we can redeem that part of it. And so thank you for having me on.
Oh, buddy, it's been great tonight. And I want to just thank you for your friendship. We've enjoyed you every time you come on the McFiles. I hope 2023 brings you our way often. We're going to try to get you on at least once a month, once every other month when we can, because, as I said, our people have always responded well to you. And I do want to mention AmericanMinute.com, folks. Go to his website. He has got a tremendous amount of books. I encourage you to go buy them. You can sign up for a daily email. I get their email. It's really good. It's just a summary, a history. If you want to get all this history, it's really good stuff. And if you feel led to get these books, and this book is an intriguing read, and I think it would be worth your time to get it and read it, and let Mr. Federer have a Merry Christmas by the book sales and experience the spirit of St. Nicholas so well. And I encourage our people to do that. Buddy, God bless you. Thank you so much. And if you, as I said, hope you have a Merry Christmas. And I will see you after the first of the year. We didn't even get a chance to talk about it tonight. Today is the Bill of Rights Day when this is airing. And I want to talk to you about the government stuff next time, because the holidays will be gone. And we'll get back to more of the government and some things that you have been talking about lately with your website and your so forth. And I do want to get your insight on that, because it's really good stuff. But thank you so much, my friend, and we thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you, and Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
Sounds good to me. Thank you. William Federer, everyone. Put some fire in that house for him. We'll be right back. And yes, we will be right back. And yes, Virginia, there was a Santa Claus. There is a Santa Claus. And it's good stuff tonight. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed it last time he did it. As I said, we didn't have the PowerPoint. Something was going on goofy with the computer last time, and we couldn't get the PowerPoint up. This time we did. It made it tremendously good. I hope you enjoyed this tonight. And it was so intriguing to me, because when we talked about this on a Wednesday night here a few weeks ago, we talked about the Christmas tree behind me. And people wrongly quote Jeremiah, that verse in Jeremiah about decking the tree with ornaments and all, and they think that's referring to a Christmas tree. Well, it's not. And I don't want to get into the details of that. But I hope you saw the origins of really the reason why the tree was used. And it was a symbol to teach the Trinity. And it was intriguing to me that Hanukkah, which again, all these legalists, the legalists that will fight you about the Christmas tree, they'll sit there and tell you if you don't worship the feast day, you're going to burn in hell. Well, guess what? That Feast of Hanukkah, if you didn't catch this, the Feast of Hanukkah, the lights, which we will be commemorating starting Monday night, and we'll have a teaching on this Wednesday night of next week. The lights of Hanukkah were used to light some of these trees to illustrate, again, the light of the world. Everything pointed to Christ. But that verse in Jeremiah that is misquoted and used to hammer people over the head, folks, is not even referred. They didn't have a Christmas tree back in Jeremiah's day. They wouldn't have known what that was. And that's how stupid people get when they become legalists. And we talked about legalism yesterday morning on the Bible study. But this was an intriguing study. And folks, if you back away and just listen to what he was trying to say tonight, it didn't start out, this paganism that you see today, what you see in the current world, which where a lot of it came from the Dutch, and Henry VIII bastardized it quite a bit in England. But the original St. Nicholas, one they called them saints, and I've got my own issues about calling people saint. There's none good but God, but that's another issue. I don't want to get into that tonight. But this man, Nicholas, was a Christian. And he fought against evil. He fought against evil. He was generous. He stood up against child sacrifice. He stood up against trafficking. He stood up against abortion. Stood up against corrupt politicians. I just wonder if all these people that are so anti-Christmas and anti-St. Nick and anti-all this, are they doing the same thing? No, they're not. No, they're useless, because that's all they do is they are legalists, and they want to find something to condemn others about because that makes them feel spiritual and holy. And all it does is illustrate their unholiness and their evil, coming from an evil heart of unbelief. And again, it's not about the day, not about the trappings, it's not about anything. But this historical thing tonight, to carry us on this journey, you're not going to hear that from anybody else but William Federer. And I tell you what, he did an outstanding job tonight. And I just hope that you got something out of it. If you want to get that book, we just told you where to get it, AmericanMinute.com. And you can find his website there. And I encourage you to visit that website, and you can get that book. And I'm just intrigued. And I will say this, I do want to discuss the shepherds, because I've told you all this, and I believe the same thing. I believe for years that Jesus was probably born in the fall, maybe in the spring. But I have to tell you, he made a pretty good argument tonight that he very well may have been born on December the 25th. I'd never really heard that before until tonight. And that's why we have guests on the McFiles, because sometimes the host gets educated. But he made a good argument. And I'm going to chew on that. And again, he was very clear about it, folks. He wasn't being adamant about it. He's not clear. He's not sure. None of us are sure, because the calendars of old are not the same calendars that we use today. And but he made a pretty strong case for why that December 25th may be the day. Now, what that day's been turned into by the Catholic Church is that's a different discussion. But I want to make it clear tonight, again, folks, it's not about the date. It's not about the trappings. It's not about any of this. The whole reason we are honoring this holiday is he came. He came. That's the issue. Jesus came. He had to come as a baby. He had to come as a virgin-born child in the stock of Adam, in likeness of Adam, a sinless person. That's why he had to be virgin-born. And he remained sinless throughout his entire life, became a sinless sacrifice, so that the sons of Adam that are sinners could be free from sin, that he could become the mediator, the bridge between sinful man and a sinless God. He became man. He was sinless. He bridged the gap between the two. Isn't that beautiful? And that's why we celebrate Christmas. That is why we celebrate Christmas. That is why we celebrate Christmas. And I want to thank you all for being a great audience. It was good stuff tonight. Did you enjoy this? Put some fire in that house. Put some fire in that house tonight. And we are grateful for him. And we hope you enjoyed this. This was really tremendous. And can't think of a better way to end our week on than this tonight. It worked out beautifully. Hopefully next week we're going to have Sharon Boland back with us. And we're going to have John McTurnan. That'll be our two main guests. Eric Karen will be back, Josh Rosenstern, and we're not going to be airing all week next week. We got the holidays coming, and we're actually not going to be back on air till Sunday after tonight. We've got family time coming up this weekend ourselves, and next week too. But it is a holiday, so it's going to be a sketch schedule, and then we're not sure what we're going to do after Christmas. It'll be very few shows after Christmas, if any. We're going to take some time off, and if we do anything, it'll be replays during that time. Now, we will have a special Christmas Eve service, the 24th, and a New Year's Eve service, December 31st. I will mention this. The last thing we will do tomorrow will be at 9 o'clock in the morning or around that time, depending on how we get Vihaji on air and get set up. In India, we're going to do a special Christmas service in the morning. It'll air without doubt on the Faith Network. We may air it on the E Network, but it is going to air on our Faith Network and Facebook in the morning. And we're going to be live in India, speaking to the beautiful congregation of Alpha Global Ministries there with Baha'i, and such a dear friend. And I'm so excited. We and him talked the other night, and we're grateful. We did this last year. And we're going to be on there in the morning, and then that'll wrap us up. That'll wrap us up for the week. And we'll have just one service Sunday morning, and then we'll give you the rest of the day off. I want you to enjoy these holidays, folks. I want you to take time and spend time with your family. Don't fall into this selfishness, and take this opportunity during these holidays. Go to your family. Enjoy your family. Take time away. Don't waste your time on this internet, and just enjoy these holidays. Enjoy the season. Enjoy the lights of it. Enjoy the love of it. Enjoy the special part of it. Please do that for me, and worship the Savior this season. Worship the one that William Federer talked about tonight. Worship the Christ of the season. He's not just the Christ of Christmas, folks. He's the Christ of all seasons. And worship him this holiday season, this Christmas season. And I think that is some wise advice tonight. Mark, 9 o'clock a.m. in the morning, 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern, buddy, for the India service. And it will air on the Faith Network. You need to be subscribed to our Faith Network, folks, if you're not. If one of my moderators could put that link in on the E-Network would be great. And we hope that you can join us over there. It's going to be a good time in the morning. We're not going to be long. It'll be about a half-hour service. And we're going to, again, just speak a little bit in the morning to encourage the church in India tomorrow. And that'll be it. There will be no show tomorrow night, no show Saturday, just one service Sunday. And then Monday night, it's probably just me. And if we don't get Sharon back on, Sharon will be back first of the year. But we will have John McTurnan next week and Eric Karen for sure. And we're going to hope to get Josh Rosenstern back. But if Josh don't come back, he'll also be back first of the year. So we got a lot of guests coming. And we appreciate all of you that have been with us tonight. And we hope that you enjoyed Mr. William Federer. I got a brand new song. Me and Eddie Cole today. We were messing around in the studio. And Eddie's such a good buddy. I tell you, he is just a dear, dear friend. And I want to just say tonight prayers for the DC Hill family. While I was there in studio with Eddie this afternoon, got a call from his friend. DC is a Christian recording artist and been recording gospel music for a very, very long time. And he found out today that he's got terminal cancer. And Eddie was pretty tore up about it, and for good reason, because he has recorded with Eddie several projects, up to a dozen, maybe more. And I could hear him on the phone, and he was tearing. He's in his 80s. He's definitely older, but his wife was there with him. She's not doing well, and he was literally weeping on the phone because they came in today, told him that the doctors were giving him 6 months to live because of cancer in his pancreas. And so if you pray tonight, please pray for the DC Hell family and my dear buddy Eddie Cole. He's my dear friend, and he has just been such a blessing to me in doing these CDs for me. And I just am grateful for him. And Chris Allman, him and Chris Allman both, they're both precious, and I'm grateful for them both, and so forth. If I can find what we did here, trying to find the CD, what we did, and I'm having a problem doing that. But anyway, if I can find it, I'll play you a new song tonight. If I can't, I guess we won't be playing you anything. I'll be saying goodnight and playing you an old song. But let's see here. Let's refresh this. There we go. And bear with me just a second, folks. Just bear with me. Bear with me. Oh, there it is right there. Okay, well, that's a weird way they saved it. Okay, well, we are going to play this one. This is a song that you may have heard before, and I don't think the Mac Man did too bad a job on it. And it's a salute of Christmas from us Dixie folks. And as I say goodnight tonight, this is Christmas in Dixie. And I hope this will bless your heart tonight. And I think this is it. I'll tell you if it's it. Hang on just a second. Is it that one? It is. Listen, have a good night. Let me stop that just for a second. Let me stop that for a second. Come back over here one more time. I'll see you in the morning on the Faith Network, 9 o'clock a.m., and that'll be it for tomorrow. 30-minute service from India. We love you guys tonight. Email William Federer. Let him know you enjoyed his show tonight. It's good stuff tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it encouraged you. Enjoy the season without condemnation. Enjoy the season. Put your tree up. Put the lights up. Celebrate the Christ of the season. Celebrate the Christ of the season. We're going to talk about Hanukkah next week. Celebrate this season. Celebrate his coming, folks. Don't be condemned by these legalists and by these evil people that will condemn you for doing this, but yet they'll go out and be just as evil and listening to false doctrine like there ain't no tomorrow. It's amazing. It's amazing how people want to pick and choose what they condemn and what they don't. Enjoy this season. And if you don't enjoy this season, I'm going to come out there and I'm going to be the bear man. And anyway, I don't command you. I never command you to do anything. But see this? This is my Santa hat. Enjoy the season tonight. Because it's Christmas in Dixie. And enjoy Christmas in Dixie and wherever you're at in this country tonight. I love you. Enjoy this song. And I'll see you tomorrow, Lord willing. Good night, everybody. By now in New York City, there's snow on the ground. Out in California, the sunshine's falling down. Maybe down in Memphis, Graceland's all in lights. And in Atlanta, Georgia, there's peace on earth tonight. Christmas in Dixie, it's snowing in the pines. Merry Christmas from Dixie to everyone tonight. It's windy in Chicago. The kids are out of school. There's magic in Motown. The city's on the move. In Jackson, Mississippi, to Charlotte, Caroline, and all across the nation. It's a peaceful Christmas time. Christmas in Dixie, snowing in the pines. Merry Christmas from Dixie to everyone tonight.
And from Fort Wayne, Alabama,
And Knoxville, Tennessee, Merry Christmas tonight. Oh, there's no place like home for the holidays. For no matter how far away you roam, when you pine for the sunshine of a friendly gaze, for the holidays you can't be home sweet home. I met a man who lives in Tennessee, and he was headed for Pennsylvania and some homemade pumpkin pie. From Pennsylvania, folks are traveling down from Dixie's sunny shore. From Atlantic to Pacific, gee, the traffic is terrific. Oh, there's no place like home for the holidays. 'Cause no matter how far away you roam, if you want to be happy in a million ways, for the holidays you can't be home sweet home. From Pennsylvania, folks are traveling down to Dixie's sunny shore. From Atlantic to Pacific, gee, the traffic is terrific. Oh, there's no place like home for the holidays. 'Cause no matter how far away you roam, if you want to be happy in a million ways, for the holidays you can't be home sweet home. Home sweet home, I'm coming home. Home sweet home. Oh, mama, bake me some of that pumpkin pie. I'm coming home. I'm coming home.
There's no place like home from the holidays. I don't think I've lost my mind, but we did this one here today, and all I can say is enjoy these holidays, because Christmas is all around. Let this song get you fired
Greeting
up.
cards.
Wrong one. This is the one right here.
Christmas is all around tonight. Enjoy and rock out. See ya. See ya.
I feel it in my fingers. I feel it in my toes. Christmas is all around me. Come on and let it show. It's written in the wind. It's everywhere I go. So if you really love Christmas, come on and let it show. You know I love Christmas, I always will. My mind's made up the way that I feel. There's no beginning, there'll be no end. 'Cause on Christmas, you can depend. You gave your presents to me, and I gave mine to you.
I gave mine to you.
I so need you beside me in everything I do. You know I love Christmas, I always will. My mind's made up the way that I feel. There's no beginning, there'll be no end. 'Cause on Christmas, you can depend. On Christmas, you can depend. It's written in the wind. It's everywhere I go. So if you really love me, come on and let it snow. So if you really love me, come on and let it show. If you really love me, come on and let it show. Come on, let it show. It's Christmas. Let it show. Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens, brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things. Cream-colored ponies and crisp apple strudels, doorbells and sleigh bells and schnitzel with noodles, wild geese that fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. Girls in white dresses and blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and eyelashes, silver white winters that melt into spring. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things. then I don't feel so bad. Girls in white dresses and blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and eyelashes, silver white winters that melt into spring. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things. Then I don't feel so bad. Jingle bell, jingle bell rock. Jingle bells swing and jingle bells ring. Snowing and blowing up bushels of fun. Now the jingle hop has begun. Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell rock. Jingle bell chimes and jingle bell time. Dancing and prancing in Jingle Bell Square. In the frosty air, what a bright time. It's the right time to rock the night away. Jingle bell time is a swell time to go gliding in a one-horse sleigh. Giddy up, jingle horse, pick up your feet, jingle around the clock. Mix and mingle and the jingle and feed, that's the Jingle Bell Rock. What a bright time, it's the right time to rock the night away. Jingle bell time is a swell time to go gliding in a one-horse sleigh. Giddy up, jingle horse, pick up your feet, jingle around the clock. Mix and mingle and jingle and feed, that's the jingle bell, that's the jingle bell, that's the Jingle Bell Rock.